So what I'm going to do is just give you a very brief, quick genesis of where we are and where we've arrived. And for those who are not too familiar with Zedna, I hope it's helpful to you. I see some, a few new faces. So I'll be very brief, and then Vika will go into a little bit of detail around that. With reference to the talk from Argentina, it perked my ears around the ISPs who are licensed and those who are not licensed. And I guess in our country, everybody is not licensed. That's the fact. So right now, we don't have any structure in terms of the .za space, in terms of a formal structure of a registry, registrars and registrants. So maybe this would interest you in terms of the work we're doing. So we were appointed in 2003, post a bloody fight between namespace and government. And so that's how really we were created. And so the board was appointed in 2003. Fortunately or unfortunately, Mike was one of the panelists that went through all the candidates. And that board was constituted what I call 50-50 plus 1. And so the 50, there were 4 geeks and 4 dark people or darkies who were in the dark from an internet point of view. And so this was an extremely challenging board to manage. And I guess the first tenure of the board, at least the first 4 years, were more of an education for all of us. We learned a lot about the internet, and those who were in the internet learned a lot about the world outside the internet. So I guess we have now been fully consummated as a board. When we entered this realm, these magic words of openness, trust, confidence, and we know it all were sort of the internet speak or geek speak. And our first board, the 4 geek people duly tried to bulldoze us into open it up. What that meant is open up at the top level, and everything will sort itself out. And for those of us who were not much in the know, it was very helpful that we needed a period to educate ourselves. And this period of education allowed us to take a breather and really understand what the heck open up at the top means. And also allowed us in that education period to interact with a number of constituencies, both locally and globally. Yeah, so we did not open up at the top. We also had somebody from Ouder, a well-known figure in the ICANN, Chris Despen, who came to speak to us and tabled a cautionary note around how we should manage the .za space. Clearly, one of the first milestone for .za was the redelegation of the zone back to South Africa, which is now still in the custodian of our outsourced partner, Internet Solutions. So we thank them as well. I do want to, at this point, also recognize, I was going to recognize 2 of my co-directors, but it's Duncan, who's with us here. Not sure where Ant is. And then the team from the office, that's Vika Mpasani, our general manager, and one of our technical people in the office as well, Cedric. Thank you. We were clearly attacked, cajoled, courted, confronted by all sorts of experts with a great deal of pessimism in the board. Exactly what is the authority going to do? And that was much of 2004. In 2005, as part of our education exercise, we agreed to enlist the help of an independent individual, who happens to be Ant Brooks, to write a paper for the board and give us a view as to exactly where the industry is and what the options are going forward and what kind of questions we should be asking. And this then became our public consultative document, which we duly released, and we had, I think, a meager 4 or 5 responses. So much for vocal interaction versus the intellectual input that we really needed from the industry. But anyway, amongst the dark people, the lights did go on through this exercise as we learned more and more about the internet space. With that consultative process, by 2006, we duly communicated that the board is now seriously thinking of adopting a strategy of a central registry, or the infamous CR, and we also appointed the general manager in 2006. 2007 was quite a significant year. We began based on that communication to solicit all the potential CR players, but we quickly realized that we were being heavily lobbied and maneuvered by quite a few international players. Local players who also began to move. In terms of the local environment, obviously BE becomes a big issue, and so the board felt we didn't want a scorecard compliance-centric response. We were also acutely aware that the skills capacity was fairly small, very narrow in terms of its diversity, and it was really important that whatever the board decides, that we embark on a central registry, and whatever that promotes in terms of resources, we leverage those resources in building the capacity and the expertise and the know-how on a wider basis. The board tenure also ended in mid-2007, and we have our own internal little saying called the curved ball, which we duly threw at each other towards the end of that first board's tenure. And that curved ball was that the CR will not be through a public RFP process. And we weren't too excited by the potential responses that we believed we will be getting. Also, it would become fraught with a number of issues and challenges that we felt we just didn't have the capacity to apply our minds to. So we then took a decision to revisit the issue of establishing the central registry through a public call for proposals process. And was largely influenced also by the fact that we weren't keen on any international players to manage the central registry for us. The board was very firm that it had to be a South African solution for South Africans, and that we also had to use the investment that the industry had so far put into this environment and harness the capacity, skills, and the IP and the knowledge that has been built over the years. So the board really strongly felt that we need to manage the process of establishing the CR in such a manner that we maximize and create a South African solution. So the new board was appointed just about post-August of 2007. It was still 50-50 plus one. Still had that level of diversity, but I have a great bunch of directors. Everybody had come up to speed with the issues, and the board was able to really deliberate very seriously on a number of these issues. And so I really want to take this opportunity to thank my co-directors thus far on this journey for the last 3 years. Well, this is the 4th year. So then with this new board, the question was, who is the CR? Can Zedna be the CR? And then that allowed us to re-look at the Act itself. And we quickly realized that the Act under which we are governed is really a product of consensus to that earlier bloody fight that I referred to. So the Act is fraught with a number of or let's say lack of clarity, which just didn't allow us to make the kind of decisions that we believed were appropriate in terms of where we find ourselves right now. So we put out the word that Zedna may be thinking about being the CR. So we had pretty much a prosthetic response, quite severe, and we were pretty much strapped by the local community in terms of a big net in terms of Zedna being the CR. So that pretty much was accelerated education on how these things work. And but then we felt that we just didn't want to have this huge dependency on our legacy and genesis, and figure out how do we look at best practices today instead of where we've come from. So we intensified our international consultation, and we began to review global best practices. And we also began to communicate our dilemma with more international stakeholders. And pretty much it confirmed the input we were getting at a local level, that we can't be referee and player. And I think just to demonstrate the gap and the gulf between internet practitioners and the rest of the world, we had the opportunity to present Zedna to a parliamentary portfolio committee. I won't tell you which one, because we've had 3 different ones in the last few years. And the discussion revolved around how important that zone file is. And people were pretty much proposing that we build a Fort Knox facility somewhere in a hill and lock away the zone file, because it is of such strategic national importance. So I'm just giving you that anecdotally so that you understand the gap between what this community accepts as the norm and practices in terms of the internet. It's not quite it when you go outside of this environment. In 2010, last year, we got people who told us what the time is on our watch, a bunch of consultants. That's what they do. You normally pay them a lot of money to tell you what the time is on your watch. They pretty much told us exactly what we knew. And so Vika will go into a little bit more detail exactly how we went about that. So we had a consultant at a functional level and at a technical level. And we also then began to, with the consultative process with the consultants, we also then reinforced our efforts to engage with the local community a lot harder and with a lot more focus. And I think it's paid handsome dividends. In my closing remarks after Vika's presentation, I'll bring you a little bit up to speed and give you a bit insight into more or less where we are in terms of the .za space. But clearly, today, having walked that journey from 2003, bumpy, but I think as of last year and with the new board's approach, I think everybody understands we're all in this together and that we need to find a solution that works for us. So clearly, it's everything about how do we leverage the IP sweat and everything else that's been invested to date. So that's the short story and update on Zedna. So I'll ask Vika now to present to you a little bit more detail as to what's happened to date. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have a presentation that I've prepared here. At least the technician is my witness that I've prepared a presentation, but for some reason this machine is not picking it up because time is really not on our side. We started really late, almost an hour late, and we want to be finished at 4. I will simply just speak through this presentation and give the key pointers following up on what Tashmok has already presented. The whole purpose is to cover exactly what's at the core of the central registry exercise and where we are right now and what we can expect going forward. All right. Yeah, maybe just important to remind people that the ZA Domain Name Authority is the regulator of the ZA namespace in terms of the ECT Act, Chapter X. So we have a clear mandate where we pretty much can do nothing, not much more than what the Act says we must do. But pretty much we manage and administer the ZA namespace. We regulate in terms of licensing registries and registrars. Registries being the entities that sit with a domain name database, like in the case of CO.za, you have Uniforum. They would fall under a category of a registry. And then you have the ISPs that will normally access that database to register names and to update details for the names registered in there for their clients. Those ISPs we would call in this context registrars. So in terms of the Act, you are required to license registries and registrars and also develop policy and conduct any research or investigations that are aimed at improving the space. And also likewise, make sure that our space, the ZA namespace, complies with international best practice. And the Central Registry is one project in particular that will help us to comply with global best practice in terms of the registry operations. We, as you know, we have a second level domain structure. Like I've already said, co.za, ac.za. We are not like guys say like .fr, the French or other country domains where you can register your website name directly under the country's top level domain. You can get a name like maybe inet.fr in the case of France. In our case, you do not get that. You have to choose whether you fall under co.za or org.za. And we also have quite a number of what we call moderated domains that, whilst they are available for registration, not anybody can register there. ac.za, school.za, they serve specific communities. In terms of the Central Registry, I think, taking off from what Tashmok already reported, yes, we went through an exercise of making sure that what we are present or what we want to do is proven by facts and it makes business sense. We move from just only having an ambition to having now detailed analysis of whether it can take off or not. And last year, some may remember, we had an exercise for developing a clear business model for the Central Registry. We had a consultant who was helping us to develop that business model. Pretty much the purpose was to determine what the business model should be, what should drive the course of this Central Registry, how should it generate revenue, and what functions should it really do? Should it just be only a purely technical entity? Who does marketing? Who does admin and billing? The second aspect of that exercise also was to identify an appropriate governance structure for the Central Registry. Should it be a commercial entity or a not-for-profit? What should it do in-house and what should it not do in-house? And what will be the role of the ZA stakeholders like your ISPs and the domain name holders? We also had another exercise that ran immediately after the business model exercise, which we called the functional specifications exercise. And we had a consultant who was helping us with that. The main point in particular was to come up with functional specifications that will make sure that this particular entity functions in terms of what we call global best practice standards. The functional specifications exercise needed, therefore, to tell us what should be the functional roles, business processes, organizational processes, technical standards, security standard, and very importantly, the pricing of the services that the Central Registry will offer. And then there were obviously outcomes from these two exercises. The business model exercise confirmed, as Ashmuk also said, confirmed what we knew, we already knew or were thinking along, and that we needed to continue and keep our second level domain structure. We will not do away with co.za and allow people to register names directly under ZA. We'll keep that structure. We needed also to include other second level domains in this central registry platform, because general consensus and reality is that we still have differing standards between the second level domains in terms of their operation. We needed also to avoid cross-subsidization, because some of the domains of the ZA second level domains are still taking free registrations. The central registry needed to be not-for-profit, and it needs to be inclusive of the ZA stakeholders. And its technical back end ideally should be initially outsourced, at least, because that what would make business sense. Now, in terms of the functional specifications, yes, we're able to eventually come to a point where we now have a set of what we call documentation that guides what the central registry should do. From a pricing point of view, we have a clear registry pricing framework. There will be some things going forward that I think it's a couple of months down the line, ZEDNA will be in a position to announce in terms of making the whole pricing framework within the ZANM space to be competitive. Of particular importance is that we cannot ignore the reality of what is called the new generic top-level domains that ICANN will be introducing. I think if we're lucky, late 2012, but the reasonable timeline for that will be 2013 early, where you see new extensions, top-level extensions entering in the market. You can now get your .mtn and get your .vodacom or .sabc. Now, but probably those will be less of a competition. It's the ones that are generic, like your .bank, your .car, your .music, and others that will definitely enter the market then. And it is important that from the ZA point of view, to see our space growing and people of South Africa rallying behind ZA, our pricing should be such that it's it's affordable enough for people to buy our names. So that's one of the frameworks that we clearly have now from that the functional specifications exercise. The organizational structure is there as well. What really constitute best practice in terms of the registry standards is also now clearly defined. We want an automated system that runs in terms of certain standards, what is called within the internet engineering speak RFCs, the request for comments. For example, your .com, your .uk, your .au all run what is called an EPP standard for their registry systems, which is a completely automated registration interface. It also has a parallel interface that is web-based, and that makes for easy registration of names. You register a name in a space of a minute with all the monies already put in already paid. You get a name if it's available within a space of a minute. So it's important that the central registry adhere to such standards. Currently, we do not have, we didn't have this standard and this kind of automation, even in the case of co.za, until recently, with co.za having their own system that they've been working on to try and upgrade the co.za interface. Our security standards also for the central registry are clear and well defined. In terms of the benefits that this will bring, you probably could probably could guess in any case from now, right now, what some of the benefits. Automation brings a lot of benefits because it means in effect also what we call registrars, not only locally but also globally, can be able to be accredited and be able to register names directly in the ZA name space. Gone are the days where you become too protective of your space and keep it to a certain group of people and try and put a number of prohibitive restrictions. Now are the days where it is a reality that if you are a trademark owner or you are a brand owner, you want to register and protect your brand or trademark name in as many domains as possible. It makes business sense. So what it effectively now translates to is the scenario where you get registrars, wherever they are, trying to pick certain registries or domains and say, South Africa is a very important market for us. So I may be in the United States, but I want to protect my trademark in South Africa because maybe in the future I'm going to trade in South Africa using that product. So this automated interface will allow your guys like your Tukaus, your GoDaddies, your OpenSRS and others to be able to register names. And that means growth for the ZA space in terms of the number of domain names registered. It also will mean growth in terms of the revenue that comes in, which then also will give us an interesting headache because the central registry will be operating on a cost recovery principle. And what we hope to achieve through that is that the more the number of names are registered, the lower the price becomes, because we are not a profit-making, neither will the central registry be a profit-making entity. So that's one of the key benefits, automation and the ability of international registrars to be able to register ZA names. We also have one of the benefits, obviously, is that most of what we call unrestricted second-level domains in the ZA space will have to be migrated to the central registry. Or if they are not, at least whoever will be running them should meet certain kinds of standards of registry, operational standards that should be equivalent to the standard that the central registry will be operating in. It will also help us to have uniform standards, therefore, across all the ZA second-level domains. And in particular, it will help the local registrars to be able not only just to register CO.ZA names in an automated way, but whatever other second level is there in the central registry platform can now be automated in terms of registration and the management of domain names. So that's pretty much the where we are with the central registry and the thinking in the nutshell of how the central registry will be. It's said, unfortunately, that the slides did not come up. So in terms of the work we are doing, we are transitioning. We are in a transition to the central registry now. From a policy and regulatory point of view, there's work that we've done in the past and we put on hold until we could get to where we are now, where the central registry is clearly defined. And that one of those of that kind of work is what we call the general ZA domain name policies. That puts simple requirements like if you register a name, you must go through a registrar. There should be a fee that you pay, and you pay through a registrar who then pays it to the central registry. So that policy is in the pipeline. At the right time, we will release it because we're a membership entity and stakeholder-based entity. Whatever policy we do normally goes through a public consultation. There's been issues in the past about who's eligible to register names in certain second-level domains, org.za in particular being one of the thorny ones. We will be having a workshop on if I remember well, on the 4th of October, where we will be trying to clarify the org.za policy and eligibility issues, because there are those who say anybody should be registering names under org.za. The org.za administrator says no, it's for non-profit, and sometimes the issues about the charter can prove it, and then you go back and say, where's the charter? And then you realize there's not really a documented charter. So ZN has been called in to intervene and clarify the org.za policy. But for all the other second-level domains, we've done work last year, and we kept it on hold until this time. We'll be releasing those charters as well to clarify which domains are open, which domains that people can register names into, which ones that people cannot register names into unless they are from a specific community. The ADR regulations, the alternative dispute resolution regulations, are the regulations that allow people to resolve disputes over CO.za names without having to go to court. It's speedy, it's much speedy, it's cheaper, and you get the expertise of senior legal people there. So far it's been CO.za, but with the central registry coming into play, we see a need to extend now these regulations to cover disputes whether over org.za and other second-level domains. But it's going to be a process. I already mentioned that we will need to migrate some of those open or unrestricted second-level domains into the central registry, and also define their operational policy framework. This is not currently the case for all second levels. There are those where the operational framework is not clear, save that there's a charter that says it's only for these people. So we will also be expecting the central registry to do that kind of work. That's pretty much the work that we are currently doing. We are currently embarking on because of the milestone that we've achieved in terms of the central registry. We will be communicating clearly going forward from here what will happen with the central registry. We were not going to keep it in the dark because we feel that we've done enough work that we can now gladly show to the public. But we need to conclude a couple of things before we can come out about what's going to happen. Of key importance is that we should seek to develop the ZA namespace. As I've already alluded, the new TTLDs will provide competition, but we believe that we still have time to rally local businesses and people behind the central registry. So all in all, expect the central registry to become a reality soon. I thank you.
Thank you, Vika. There's definitely slides here. The order of proceedings is that we'll hold up questions at the moment. Dr. Gadjar will make a few more remarks, and then we'll open the floor to questions.
Thanks, Mike. Some of you who are closer may see that Apple logo, but it's not an Apple machine. So I'll get Vika to graduate to an Apple. I think Vika touched on some of the points. In principle, the board felt that the central registry needs to be a for non-profit organization and running on a cost recovery basis. And what informs this is the principle of marshalling the resources through the registration process in building capacity and skills, which we believe any private request for proposals would really not pay attention to that area. So we believe that this is a right strategy, at least for the next few years, until it becomes self-defeating, and we can always revisit then, and hopefully I'm not the chairman at that time. It provides a purely technical role, the central registry, and will be governed, and the principle here is it will be governed by an independent board. So there will be separation between the regulatory function of ZEDNA and the central registry. And in this consultative process that we've gone through over the last 2 years, we've obviously talked to everybody, and Mike can probably share this with us. He probably was in a similar situation where I believe the story goes that you said that you cannot manage this any longer and asked for volunteers to put up their hands. And we're going through that same process right now. And that is to say, okay, where do we look for the hands that go up? So clearly, in terms of second level domain operators, they would obviously be key in terms of establishing the central registry. And in our eyes, all second level domain operators are all equal, but applying an Orwellian principle that some are more equal than others, the reality and the fact is that the largest second level space is the COZA. And clearly there's been an asset and skill and depth built into that organization. So this is the first sort of public communication that we've worked very hard with Uniforum. And I'm very thrilled that they have put up their hand once again to look at how they can play a role with us and with the rest of the industry in establishing the central registry. So we haven't concluded this work, but it's rapidly coming to an end. And but I believe we've gone beyond the point where there can be any reasons why we should not be doing that. So I think we're thrilled that we found a South African solution with South African skills base. It's also an acknowledgement of all the work that people have done over the years. Building a large second level like COZA is not that easy. But again, it had to move in with the best international practices of automated registrations and also under a governance framework of registry and registrars in a formal structured way where role players are formally licensed. So we are very excited to work with Uniforum, but we are equally excited to work with everybody And thus far, our indications are that all open second level operators would want to become part of the central registry. So that's all I wanted to say in the closing remark. Thanks, Mike.
Just hold on to this time.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we open the floor to questions. I just wonder if who's going to take which questions and where they should be located. It's probably better to come up to you, the fall guy. Just your comment about recognising that one can't do it all oneself. It's a little bit like the farmer who's faced with a plague of locusts, and you can get 2 blocks of wood and put a locust on there and kill it like that. It's dead easy, but you can't kill a swarm. You've got to have a more organised setup. And I keep thinking about that because that takes me back to about 1995 when Uniforum took over the COZA administration. I'm pleased to see that's still playing and going to play a major role. Anyway, that's enough for me. Questions, comments from the floor? No, come on, there must be something, guys. There's a question.
Could I perhaps just ask one question about your statement about the org.za domain? What happens to people who are currently for-profit entities who may be registered in space that's to be reserved for non-profits only? What will the transition, or what arrangements will be made in that case?
Clearly, all of that has to be managed. So I think the idea behind this consultative process is to see what we can throw up as the issues that need to be considered. But I think the style is not to disadvantage willy-nilly any stakeholder. So we'll move cautiously and make sure we work in the best interest of everybody. So that's the best. I don't have a straight answer for you, simply because that hasn't been considered in detail. And as Vika mentioned, there's a workshop around these issues.
Any idea roughly how many domains are registered under the different subdomains of the ZA space?
I wish Vika's sudo Mac would have worked, but he did have that. Roughly, I think we have in total how many registrations in the country? Open? There's over 700, I believe, in COZA. Is that correct?
700,000.
700,000, yeah.
And OGZA 20,000.
And OGZA is about 20,000. Those are the major ones. And then I think it narrows down quite rapidly. Yeah. Any other questions?
Question from me.
Yes.
Yes.
I was waiting for that.
I've got to have a question. I'm the guy who lost touch with the ZA DNA board, which is actually a compliment because I've been able to let go quite happily of ZA and it's been managed very well. But I know one of the things that one of the AGMs was an issue about finances and support from the government. Would you like to comment on that?
I think very early on the board realized that the sooner we find a solution by the industry for the industry, it helps in the management in terms of the relationship between the industry and government. So to answer your question directly, Mike, funding from government has been erratic. And we fortunately had assistance to make sure that we don't lose focus on what we need to do. But I think that's the value that the central registry brings to us fairly quickly. So it creates a revenue model that allows us to be very quickly independent of any outside funding. And again, the nature of the organization as it was established under the Act, we're not a parastatal, we're not supposed to operate under a PFMA regulation, but we're a membership-based organization, but the directors get appointed by the minister, so it's kind of very grey. But we have been receiving our funding from the Department of Communications to date. It's always a challenge in terms of making sure that funding comes in timeously, make sure that your operations are not at risk. It has been one of the serious reasons why the capacity of ZEDNA as an office hasn't really grown by leaps and bounds.
Last chance for more questions. Okay, we'll close it. Thank you very much, our two speakers, Rika and Rajah.